Greetings, everyone. Pete Pardo here from Sea of Tranquility. Welcome to another episode of Friday Morning at the Fun House alongside Martin Popoff. And it's rant day once again, Martin, right? Good
Absolutely.
morning. How
Yes,
are you?
rant day. Gotta love rant day on a cold, chilly autumn day. So
Yes,
ready to
yes.
roll.
It is. We've seen some temps in when I've woken up in the morning in the 30s, frost on the ground a couple days this week. I don't think it's quite as cold today, but it's dreary gray, total fall day. I think finally this weekend I can go out and with the last time with the lawnmower and chop up the last of the leaves that have fallen and put that away for the season. I'm looking forward to that. It's almost Thanksgiving and I'm still doing this nonsense. Don't you hate it when you have some trees that like shed their leaves way later than all the rest of them? It's like, come on, give it the program. You all need to do it at the same time so I can do this once and I don't have to keep taking it out over and over and over again. So, but it doesn't work that way. Doesn't work that way.
And we had one of those massive trees in our front yard that the city decided we got to cut this thing down, right?
Oh, really?
Every once in a while they do that, right? Because huge branches fall off and knock out the power and stuff like that in storms. So
now is that
they cut it down and then they come and replace it. And they give you a new one, right?
Oh, they do. Okay, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So do they do so here in New York? They have this thing where the town will take down a dead tree and they'll do it. They'll do it. They'll pay. It's no expense to myself if it's within, I think, 5 or 8 feet from the road. Anything further than that, they won't touch. That's my responsibility to pay for. Like a number of years ago, we had all these trees right up alongside the road, like a whole line of them, and they were all dead. They were all ash trees, and I called them up. They came, boom, 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 took them all down, and didn't have to pay a cent. But they measure, right? So if it's like 10 feet back, they're like, no, that's your responsibility. So do you have that sort of thing by you as well?
Well, our situation's a little different. These are very small front yards with huge trees. Like, I don't know. I don't know how to gauge, but taller than a 2-story plus house, way taller, like double the height, right? So they basically with massive trunks like this, but they're on this small yard very close to the street. And they just kind of routinely go up and down. And when they get way too big and too old, they'll take it down and replace it and give you a little one. And then suddenly your entire sunlight situation changes and all that.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Trees. We're always talking about trees. We love them, but yet at times we hate. Once they die, we hate them because then you got to deal with it. So, all right. So today we've got a little rant episode, and I think this one's kind of like a long time coming. So there's something that we do here on the channel that I've been doing for years and years and years, and that's ranking albums, right? Ranking the album show. It's a weekly show here on the channel. We've done hundreds and hundreds of ranking shows. Martin and I get asked to go on other shows and channels to rank catalog all the time, right? But there are some catalogs that are a real pain to rank. And there's lots of reasons for them. So today, Martin and I have each picked out 5 catalogs. I've ranked all of them, and they're difficult. They're hard to talk about. There's lots of reasons why they're hard to rank, and quite frankly, it gives us at times a lot of angst to do them because of the reasons we'll talk about. Martin, I don't know if you want to expand on that a little bit before we get started.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of reasons, and this show idea was inspired by a ranking we just did about Motorhead on Hack's channel and how frustrating that was. And I remember when we ranked the Clutch catalog, that was frustrating to me as well. And I'm thinking, why is this frustrating? There's a whole bunch of reasons, right? But with the Motorhead one, there's a specific reason that we'll get into, and kind of relates to another show that we were thinking of doing as well. But so I think we'll get a little kind of inside thinking about being asked to do these on other shows and do them on our own shows. And with me, I also got this problem where I do these Goldmine top 20 lists. I've written books on these bands, right? So there's all sorts of like conflicting reasons why these things are hard to rank. But yeah, I think the concepts will come out as we go through. So I'll start with my first one, the one that inspired the show, which is kind of a tradition of causing shows to happen. This happens with me with my audio podcast as well, History in 5 Songs, where I'll just get inspired to a topic will come up based on a previous show I was on or whatever. But the Motorhead situation, so I just took out a few props. We got these newer Motorhead albums, and we've got these older Motorhead albums, right? So the idea with all this is with the Motorhead situation. I went on this show with you and Hack, and I found it very frustrating talking about these newer albums because even though even though I had all of these, my ranking was way weighted towards this newer stuff rather than the older stuff. But they're actually harder to talk about because they aren't ingrained in your nature. You didn't get them. Well, I got them as new releases, but I didn't get them as new releases 40 years ago, right?
Yeah.
And then lived with them all those years. So this is a strange catalog where to go to rank it, I ended up having, I think we only ranked the top 5. That's the other problem with a catalog like this with 22 albums or whatever it is. I mean, ranking the entire catalog is just a lot of work. So there's another issue. But with this catalog, out of my top 5, I think I had 4 of these recent Motorhead albums, and I really struggled, and decided to only have one of the old ones in there. But you always think, okay, the comments are going to be really negative because I did this or whatever. But it was funny when you look at the comments. A lot of people love that later Motorhead stuff as well. So a lot of people were supportive. But it gets into this whole thing of, are the classics were amazing for the time. They're breaking records for the time. They're the heaviest thing in the world at the time. They're creating this incredible, unique sound. Later on, the big debate is it just a better version of the Motorhead sound, or are they not? They're not originals. Are the last 10 Motorhead albums the product of a Motorhead tribute band in a way, right? Yeah, I mean, you're kind of paying tribute to the old stuff, but it's all better in a way. The productions are better, but is that fair? Blah, blah, blah. Right. So I always have a problem with this catalog, just simply because I feel like you're always struggling with the idea of, well, I could go whole hog and just put all, and I almost did, right, with this. Or you could, or if you put only the old stuff, even that wouldn't even look unsensible. You can make the argument for that. So there's this big dichotomy. And then what happens with these things, just to rant a little more, is that every time you're asked to do these types of lists, especially in print, if you think a Louder Sound, or you think of a Kerrang list or a Rolling Stone list, there's all sorts of, you got to include one of those and one of those and one of those.
Yeah.
Right. That's a big deal too. So anyways, I'll leave it there. I don't know if you have any comments on that first one.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard. Martin, do you ever wish that you weren't someone in your late 50s who had all this history with these albums, and you could be someone who's like 25 or 30 today, who's discovering a catalog like Motorhead for the first time, and you don't have any bias towards the early albums or the late albums? It's just like, I got all this, which one do I buy first? So maybe you buy Bastards first, and then maybe you get Bomber next, and then maybe you get the last album next, right? So there's really, you have no history with them, so you can, whatever becomes your favorite because and if you're not listening to someone kind of barking at you, well, you should, Overkill should be your favorite album, and Ace of Spades should be your favorite album, you're just going to judge them based on how you're hearing them, right? So it was tough for me to do that show too with Hack. I enjoyed it. And Hack, if you're watching, we love doing the shows. That's really not the point here. It's just that the catalog is dictating this kind of angst that we're feeling right now. So for me, again, as you and I are roughly about the same age, I grew up with those Motorhead albums, those early classics. They're probably always going to be my favorites because I had nothing better in the world to do at the time but listen to music and go to school, right? So I knew them all like everything else. All the later ones, I'm in my life and I'm working and relationships and marriage and all that kind of stuff. So you get these albums, you're like, oh, really, really good. And then 3 months later, you're not listening to that anymore. And then a year later, you're listening to the next one. You're listening to the next one. You got all these records. So it's like, we'll say, I really like that album. I really like that album, right? But are we ever going to really know them and love them and have them ingrained in everything in here like we will the first 6, right? When we were that age where we had nothing else to do in our lives but love this stuff, right? So it's hard. It's really hard. And again, do we come across as it's like the old guys are always just going to pick the old albums, right? That's what the people who are the other person that I was talking about, who don't know any better, who just know this whole catalog, and they've digested it how they've digested it. So it's really difficult. And yeah, and then when we go and pick later albums in our list of favorites, the older folks like us who don't want to hear about anything being a favorite other than those original albums, like, they're just trying to be different. They're just trying to be controversial and pick some of these later albums, which will never be as good as the old classics, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's hard. It's hard.
Yeah, for sure. All right. So what's your first pick?
So my first pick is Fleetwood Mac. So I remember I did a Fleetwood Mac album ranking years ago with Jeff Young, formerly of Megadeth. And we discussed over and over again how we were going to tackle this, because here's a band that's been around a long time and has all these different eras. And there's a lot of old bands that we rank that have fallen to a similar category to this. Mm-hmm. So you have the early, much beloved Peter Green era of the band, which is basically Fleetwood Mac as a late 60s British blues band. And you have those early blues albums, right? They're great for what they are. Peter Green, one of the most respected guitar players of all time, right? Then he leaves the band. Then you've got this pre-Bob Welch era, which is kind of like, it's kind of bluesy. So you got Danny Caruana leading the band. It's kind of bluesy, kind of folky, whatever. And then they bring in Bob Welch. Then you've got this other set of albums that don't really sound like the early stuff, but it's really good. No real hits. So they're not the early albums with the folks from the UK love it. Here in America, yeah, they had fans, right? Then you got this Bob Welch era, which is actually really, really underrated in my opinion. And this handful of albums they're all kind of samey, but really, really good, kind of bluesy, kind of folky, kind of very California rock, which we'll talk about it again in a second. But no real big hits there. They weren't huge selling albums, but that's part of the catalog is just there. And for years, nobody ever talked about that part of the catalog. Then you've got, obviously, Fleetwood Mac, Rumors, Tusk, all this stuff. So you got Buckingham and Nicks join the band. All of a sudden, massive band, right? So when you're ranking the catalog, and then everything afterwards, then you got some questionable albums later on, and varying degrees of success, blah, 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 blah. But when you've got a Rumors sitting in this middle of this catalog, Rumors by default always has to be at number one. Or does it?
Yeah.
Because if you don't pick it, then the millions of people like, but it was one of the biggest selling albums of all time. How can it not be your number one? Look at all those singles. Look at that album. I agree with you. Great album. Does it have to be at number one? I don't know. Did I put it at number one? I don't even remember, Martin, to be honest with you. It was either one or two. I don't remember. But like, it's like, how do you rank this catalog that is so different from all these periods that I talked about? It's almost impossible. Like, how does all of a sudden, like, your number one could be Rumors, and number two can be Then Play On, your number three is Fleetwood Mac, your number four is Bare Trees, and then you listen, like, all these albums sound so difficult. It's almost like the logical thing to do would be to rank the Peter Green era albums on its own, rank the Bob Welch albums on their own, and then do all the Buckingham Nicks stuff going forward on their own. Yeah. But now you got three shows, and it makes it even more difficult. So we did the ridiculous thing, and we put them all together and ranked them, which was really, really hard. But, there's so many bands that fall into this category where you've got different singers, different lineups, different styles, different eras. And it's like, and you put it all together, it's just like, it's just ridiculous, because in a way, they're all kind of not really related, other than the fact that it's Fleetwood Mac, right? Yeah, I'll kind of stop there.
Yeah, and that's another one where when you got an official list and it's with a big, for a big company or a big media outlet, and they know there's going to be a lot of eyeballs and a lot of complaints or whatever, they're going to want you to spread around the love, right? Kind of thing, right?
Yes.
They don't want to show a certain personality of that writer and what they like, because that writer might like a certain era and just pop all of those at the top, right?
Yeah,
kind of thing, right? Yeah. And then the other issue that's a funny one that you brought up is we often get the complaint of, well, what do you know? I mean, it went diamond, obviously, you know, this is the best one because millions and millions of people love it, and you're just some stupid loser rock critic guy, right?
Yeah.
Kind of thing. So you get that as well. It's like success, you know, equals this is amazing, right?
Yeah, and I argue with people all this time, this term best, right? Well, because it's the biggest seller, it has to be the best.
Yeah.
I mean, best is in the eye of the beholder, right? It's like more your
Yeah.
that's why I always use this term favorites, because we all like what
Yeah.
we like, and there's no definition when it comes to albums of what is the best. How can you tell, right? That you really
Yeah.
can't. And I will
Yeah.
tell you specifically with Fleetwood Mac, a lot of people who were like, Fleetwood Mac to them is the original Peter Green era and nothing else. And they don't care about rumors and all these other huge albums. And you know, when all of a sudden you got half of the Peter Green era albums all the way down at the bottom of my ranking, all of a sudden I'm wrong. I don't understand the essence of what was Fleetwood Mac. Right.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. Okay. My next one. This is kind of interesting because it just dawned on me. There's another band that I have the exact same problem with. It's Thin Lizzy. So you've got, you know, the last Thin Lizzy album. You've got is this the first? Yeah, I think first Thin Lizzy album, second Thin Lizzy album. My, you know, complete contrarian favorite that there's a lot of love for this album out there in the world, I think. But yeah, just went on Ralph Vieira's show and we did some Thin Lizzy, and a lot of people were really liking this album a lot. But the funny problem with ranking this catalog for me, so most people, there is more or less consensus here. You're not going to pick, most people will not pick Thunder and Lightning, although there are total headbanger metalheads which will and say it's their only heavy metal album. But you're not going to see the first two picked. You're not going to see Nightlife picked. You're not going to see Vagabonds picked. You're pretty much not going to see Fighting picked, but I've seen that happen. So the funny thing with me with Thin Lizzy, and it happens with Van Halen too, this is the exact same problem. And I realized there's a complaining element here as well. So with Thin Lizzy, my problem with ranking this catalog is every time I have to do it, I'm like going, Jailbreak, Johnny the Fox, Bad Reputation, Black Rose, Chinatown, Renegade, all kind of tied for first. All kind of, you know, 9 and above, 9 to 10 sort of thing. And I have been consistent in picking Renegade, but you know, hot on its heels is Black Rose, and sometimes I will go Black Rose as well. So that's the other frustration. I'm constantly toggling back and forth, and people say, well, I thought you said it was Renegade. Well, this week it's Black Rose kind of thing, right? Now, so before I get to the complaining part, my Van Halen situation is exactly the same. And most people are like this about Van Halen as well. You will see they're a weird band in that for some, you know, it's an odd thing to have happen, but, you know, their first album is the one that will probably get voted the most highest, you know, as the best album. And it's odd that it's their first album. And I think I've always said it's their most accomplished, you know, ambitious album as well. That's a whole different thing. But my problem with Van Halen is that, again, you get into not so much the second album, but Women and Children First, Fair Warning, 1984. Again, I've got kind of like this three-way tie for first, and I don't know which one to pick. And then the first one comes in, which is totally different, but it's you know, nudging in there too, knocking on the door. You know, you got the problem with the split between the Van Hagar people and the David Lee Roth people. That's a whole nother thing. But to get to the complaining thing, I've realized with both of those catalogs, I you know, quickly, because I love them so much, I quickly get to the point where I'm like, you know what? There's maybe three and a half songs on every one of these 9s or 10s that I will willingly complain about and think that I don't like or whatever. So all of a sudden I'm like, to try to pick my favorite, I'm like putting down other ones and saying, oh, this has got 2 or 3 gaps on it, right? You know, this is not great, that is not great. And that totally happens with the Van Halen catalog. There are always songs to complain about on Van Halen albums, but yet, you know, you love them so much and you're going to rank them super high anyways. But yeah, try to pick the favorite, and it's super, super hard. So I guess what I'm saying is these are two bands that represent that idea where there's really no consensus, and you know, you could do a ranking show with someone and is like just the slate is open. You don't know what people are going to answer, kind of thing, right?
Well, this is what happens when you have a catalog where you have a handful of albums that you love so much and so equally. I mean, you know, we were talking about this off air. You know, I'm getting besieged with people requesting for me to re-rank catalogs again that I ranked like 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah.
In some instances, some of these bands may have had another album release since then, or, you know, I mean, from time to time, like you said, some of our favorites album, our favorite albums change a little bit. You know, any of them can be number one. So from year to year, you know, I mean, look at myself recently. I recently declared, Martin, God forbid, that's Slide It In has become my favorite Whitesnake album over the '87 album, which was my favorite album for decades, right, from them. I recently just declared that Master of Reality has surpassed Volume 4 as my favorite Sabbath album after decades. So it can happen. But the problem is, you know, constantly re-ranking catalogs. Again, we're talking about the same albums over and over and over again. But yeah, I mean, the Van Halen, I will totally agree with you 100% with Van Halen. I think their first album, to me, personally, is the strongest from start to finish. I don't think there's a dud on that album. All those other classic albums that they have are great, but on each one of them, there's like 1, 2, or 3 songs that I'm not 100% crazy about, but all the rest of the stuff on the albums make those the classic albums that they are. So they're hard to rank because in our minds, we think they're like 10 out of 10 albums or 5 out of 5 albums. When you really go a little bit deeper, well, each one of them has a couple songs, like you mentioned, that you maybe have an issue with, that maybe you don't really love like the other ones. So those type of things can sway our decisions and, you know, how we're feeling about albums and where we place them in the catalog.
Yeah. You know, and it's funny you bring up the re-ranking thing. For me, it's not ever been an issue of re-ranking the catalog. It's been an issue of ranking the catalog on someone else's show again, right? The doing the same show somewhere else sort of thing. And people don't realize, I mean, even when they ask you to re-rank and stuff, sure, you can re-rank it and they'll shuffle around. But your oration on that album is going to be the same as it was before. I mean, the only difference is it's moved from a 3 to a 4. Big deal, right? And then you hear that voice inside your head saying, "Man, I have said this over and over and over again so many times. I'm sick of hearing my voice, and I'm reading the negative comments at the same time as I'm saying this in my head. Like, oh, I know people are going to complain about me saying the same stuff over and over again, my same lines about whatever this album is, right?"
Yeah, and that's and to further that point, it's like, how interesting is that going to be to viewers to see me re-rank a catalog I've already talked about ad nauseum, just to see Master of Reality overtake Volume 4 in the ranking, but everything else is the same.
Yeah.
Is that all that interesting?
Yeah.
I don't know how interesting it is for me, obviously, you know, honestly.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
All right, my next choice is Michael Schenker Group. So yeah, the problem with this catalog is first the stupid name of the band, which causes problems all throughout here. You got the Magali Schenker Group, you've got you know, Schenker Pattison Summit, you've got Michael Schenker, you've got Michael Schenker Fest, you've got Michael Schenker Group, you know,
Temple of Rock.
Yeah, exactly. These kinds of Michael Schenker Group, which is a whole different Michael Schenker Group from other ones, but similar sound. I mean, then you've got Michael Schenker Temple of Rock. Yep. Yeah, you've got all sorts of it's all pretty ridiculous. Different lineups throughout. The sounds are pretty much consistent. I mean, you think of Magali Schenker Group and you might think that it's a little bit, you know, falling into the hair metal realm. You've got the Anomaly, which is my favorite of all of them, Assault Attack. This one here, your Graham Bonnet record, right? But yeah, you've got this ridiculous situation where you've got the Michael Schenker Group, formerly of UFO, you know, MSG. Ostensibly a self-titled. Then you've got a second one, which is just dumbly called MSG. What else can you call it, right? It's like, you know, he looked at his logo and said, MSG, yeah, monosodium glutamate. That's kind of neat. Let's just call it that, right? That's kind of cool. So yeah, this is, and again, you know, on a positive note, you've got this long catalog. He's been super prolific ever since sort of getting himself straightened out. He's just been on a roll, just hitting it out of the park on many albums in a row. And you go listen to this catalog, and you've got that Motorhead problem as well, where it's like you've got records that are all vying for being the best. They're better than the old stuff. I mean, later on, he brings in like almost like the Swedish Frostcore Teutonic sort of sound again, and rough kind of productions. He's heavy. He's not off on a tangent somewhere. He's just doing the stuff he really loves. He's even more European, like I'm saying, on some of this stuff. So all of those middle ones, Written in the Sand and all that sort of stuff, Arachnophobia, those are great albums. I play those a lot, right? Built to Destroy, I loved at the time, but it's kind of gone down. The production's not good. But again, yeah, you got a problem with that. The first one's kind of a studio situation put together. Second one's a little bit of a super group, but the production's not that great on it. So yeah, all over the place with this catalog. I never know what to pick. I could go middle years. I could go late years. I could go the Anomaly, Assault Attack, which I generally go with. But and then the other problem is you always have those little Facebook messengers back and forth. What do we include, right? What is part of this thing? We may as well, should we put in the Michael Schenker thank you albums? We're almost there already, kind of thing, right? So all of a sudden, it becomes a real pain of trying to figure out what the Michael Schenker group is. The name changes here and there. So does it stop? Does it pick up again? Because the name certainly picks up again. It stops and picks up. So yeah, no idea what to include. Then somebody invariably in the ranking thing has the task of, they don't know them that well, so they got to do tons of homework and go through this thing. You got to make notes. That's the other thing. When you make notes on these albums, it just doesn't come flowing out of you off the top of your head the same way. It's not as fun for you because you're looking at your notes and you're checking stuff and you're like, you're reading it off, even though now you've forgotten what the song sounds like, but you're reading your note on it, right? Kind of thing. So that happens a lot as well. And frankly, that would happen with me with Michael Schenker, maybe over the course of the last 5 albums. I would definitely have to make notes on them, but they're all really good. So
they're all really good. But yeah, how we've only had them for a couple of years. How well do we really know them, right? So yeah, I've got all of them, and it's just it's an enormous catalog. So I remember when the time came to do Schenker, I was kind of like, where do you go with this, right? This is very difficult. So all right, Martin, I am making a change to one of my picks right now, because I was just thinking about it when we were talking before, and I'm thinking about one of the probably most controversial rankings that I ever did on this channel. I didn't think so at the time, but after I started reading the comments over the months and what have you, I was like, wow, people really didn't like what I did here. And that's the Kinks.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, and again, Martin, you could probably speak for this a little bit too. Here in the States, in North America, the Kinks during their 60s, early 70s heyday were never a big band here, right? They didn't tour here a lot. Their albums didn't really sell much here, but yet that part of the catalog is beloved by people from the UK. Beloved. These are 60s and early 70s album classics. I mean, Percy, Lola, Muswell Hillbillies, Everybody's in Show Business, The Preservation Acts 1 and 2, Soap Opera, Face to Face, all these albums. And these are beloved albums, very British albums, right? I never started listening to the Kinks till I got the One for the Road live album. And then I went kind of backwards. I went and got Low Budget and Misfits, and then Give the People What They Want came out. So these albums that I'm talking about are arena rock Kinks albums. These are Kinks we want to break in America finally, and they did. These are the albums that really broke them here. These are some of the songs from those albums are the ones that were played on the radio. So for us folks in the States, that's the Kinks stuff we knew. That's the stuff that we kind of grew up with, because again, they made more of an impact here at that point in time. So my ranking was putting albums like Low Budget and whatever all the way at the top. And people who were longtime Kinks fans from the 60s, you don't know anything about the Kinks catalog. You don't understand the Kinks catalog. How in the world could you put Low Budget over Lola or over any of these other songs? It's like, why even do this ranking? You obviously don't know a thing about this band. So is that my fault because of how I was introduced to the Kinks, and you can't really say that. So as I told men, communicate with many people, it's like, listen, these are the albums that I grew up with. You grew up with the older stuff. So, and again, it goes back to that whole thing we were talking about at the beginning of the show, was when you get your entrance point into a catalog is vastly different from other people. It's all like an open book, basically. So the ones that you're introduced to first are going to be, generally speaking, the ones that you hold the most dearest. For me, it was the latter part of the catalog for the Kinks, not all those albums that came 10, 15 years beforehand. So I remember like getting done with that and feeling good about my ranking, and then reading all these comments and like, wow, people hated this. All those longtime Kinks fans, it's almost like I desecrated the catalog. So I was like, what are you going to do in that instance? You have to go with your gut, right? Those are the albums I like the most. So whatever.
Yeah, it's funny. You think of it's almost like Arthur and Muswell Hillbillies and all that is their Working Man's Dead, American Beauty thing, and then Soap Opera Misfits, that's their Bob Welch albums, and then Low Budget and Give the People What They Want are like their braying punk rock albums, right? It's just kind of nasty, and the drums are kind of bad sounding, and he's Ray shouting and stuff, right? And then it kind of stays that way throughout. Yeah, that is a tough one. And it almost speaks to the idea. This is a bit of a maybe a show idea or kind of a weird thought, but it's like when you talk about people that say, it's almost like the most elevated version of a fan is the fan that wants to go on the band with that journey the entire way, right? So they're going to love everything they're doing, and they're just very, very respectful of the journey. It's like that's their artistic journey. I'm going to trust them on that journey and go with them the entire way, right?
Yep.
So it's almost like the super deep fan, but then again, you run into this problem where if you're going to be completely logical about that idea, then you're going to say, well, the best version of the Kinks is always going to be the most recent version of the Kinks, because that's when they're smarter and they know their craft better, and they're more experienced, and they've lived more life, and this is what they want to do now. And I love these guys, but what's the version? If I really appreciate this band, the version I'm supposed to like is the version of them now, because that's the true version of them, right now, sort of thing. So it's like, it's sometimes maybe a long-term Kinks fan might pick something from all of those things, all of those eras, but maybe the radical version of being a super fan of a band is the latest album is the best one. That's what the band members will tell you, right?
They'll always tell you this is our most accomplished album. It's the strongest album we've ever done, right?
Yeah. And look how many times they'll underscore that point even further by saying I'm embarrassed by our old stuff, right? I disown our old albums, right? You get some of that as well. There's a show idea too, right? How to what extent who disowns their old catalog the most, right?
Yeah,
might be kind of interesting to look at. But all right, so my next choice is Saxon. It's a little bit like the Motorhead idea, but with a twist. So with Saxon, the problem is just like Motorhead. Let's start with the complete similarity. First of all, you're supposed to love the sacred texts, right? You're supposed to love Wheels of Steel, the first super exciting Saxon album, their second album, where it all comes together. It's 1980. They're inventing the new wave of British heavy metal. I joined the Saxon fan club at this time. I joined the Motorhead Bangers at this time from Trail, BC as a kid. My favorite happens to be Power and the Glory, which is kind of a slap in the face to Saxon, because it's the only Saxon album that sounds like this, right? It's like, am I really a Saxon? I wrote a Saxon book. I better be a Saxon fan. I'm the only guy besides Biff who's written a Saxon book, I think. But anyways, am I really a Saxon fan if this is my favorite Saxon album, like that classic old episode we did, right? So there's that. So there's that weirdness at the beginning. We're only up to 1983 here. Now, the problem is where it diverges from Motorhead is that, you and I have talked about many times, the current version of Saxon, who's been very prolific like Motorhead, is but different from Motorhead. So I think with Motorhead, you get you could argue that this is the very best version of Motorhead being Motorhead. But with Saxon, the problem is this is just like Saxon as a version of $5-6 million Man's on stage, right? This is the gleaming, perfect machine, the efficient, the absolutely up to date, the we are competing with Primal Fear and Mark Tornillo era accept version of Saxon. But the difference from Motorhead is it doesn't particularly sound like old Saxon. Because the old Saxon was a really scrappy, simple ZZ Top, punk rocky, gritty sounding band, simple riffs, classic sort of almost like pop songwriting. It was mostly pretty simple, right? It was not very maneuverable. There weren't a lot of cool riffs and tasty licks and all that. And the production certainly wasn't that great. So what you get now is this version of the band where if you are that young kid coming in without that past, you're going to look at that old stuff and really think it sounds, as Lemmy would say, ropey, right? So you would listen to the new Saxon and say, I mean, this is everything's perfect here. Everything's done right. These guys are obviously really smart and with it and modern. They're writing up to a super high standard. They're playing to a super high standard and producing that way. Why would I listen to that old stuff? God forbid the couple of stabs at hair metal in the late 80s, right? Like, that's always going to be at the bottom of the list. But yeah, so you've got this debate where you've got these amazing records, but how do they relate to the old Saxon? They kind of don't in a way. So there's my rant on that one.
Yeah, and for a lot of people, we had a conversation, Martin, with a friend of ours not that long ago, where he claimed that all those more recent Saxon albums just sound like every other metal band on the planet at this point. And that's kind of the whole Andy Sneap production thing, right? There's this sound that they have. You mentioned, modern day Accept and whatnot, and you can throw Judas Priest, Primal Fear, all these other bands, right? But yeah, all of a sudden these new Saxon albums have massive riffs, cool riffs, blazing solos. And the early stuff, as much as we love it, they're all great anthems, and those are their most well-known songs. But yeah, they're pretty simple and just at the time we thought that, well, they're from the UK. They're part of the whole new wave of British heavy metal movement. It's new and exciting, and now we look back on them and we're fond of them. But I'd argue that some of the most exciting Saxon albums that they've made in years are happening now. So, but yeah. All right, I'm going to jump over to Gary Moore next. So this is an interesting catalog to rank also because it's so varied. You've got the weird history in the beginning where you've got these releases. There's like the Gary Moore Band, which he did, I think, shortly after he left the band Skid Row. Then he's with Thin Lizzy for a little bit. So you're not going to count those, obviously, those Thin Lizzy records. Then you've got like Back on the Streets and Dirty Fingers, which were albums that were never officially released here in the States, only on imports. Then you've got Corridors of Power, which was the first official released here solo album from him. Then you got Victims of the Future, and then you got Run for Cover, and a couple of those other albums. And this is considered Gary's like hard rock / metal period. So he's fitting in with everybody else. He's releasing these great albums that I was completely into at the time. I mean, I'm a huge Gary Moore fan. I love that era. And then after the war, he takes like a little bit of a break, and then he comes back with Still Got the Blues. And then going forward are all these blues records that opened his music up to a whole new generation of fans and listeners who probably never even heard that early hard rock stuff, Martin. No idea. Oh, this great new guitar player. I remember at the time when Still Got the Blues came out, all these people's like, oh, have you heard that great new blues guy, Gary Moore? He's awesome. I'm like, yeah, he's been around forever. It's like, really? I never heard of him before. It's like, well, he used to be in Thin Lizzy, and he had all these great hard rock and metal albums in the 80s. Like, oh, never heard any of that stuff, right? End of the World. I mean, never heard any of that stuff. Whatever. So, and while for me, the first couple of blues records were pretty good. I was, I love Gary, so I was excited to hear something. But personally, I got kind of tired of that after a couple albums, and he continued to do that throughout most of his career, up until before he died. Although the last couple of albums, he was starting to return a little bit more towards rock type stuff. So for me, ranking the Gary Moore catalog is kind of difficult, because what am I going to put at the top of my list, Martin? All those early hard rock albums that I grew up with and I absolutely loved, even though I appreciate the blues stuff. And yeah, maybe Still Got the Blues might be ranking kind of high up there, but it's going to be at the top, all those hard rock records, and at the bottom, all those blues records. And that's no disrespect to the blues stuff, but I'm much more of a hard rock and metal guy than I am a blues guy. And to me, there was so much interesting and varied material on those earlier records, whereas the blues stuff is all kind of one note. You know what you're going to get from album to album. Yeah, there's a great cover of that. Yeah, there's a great original of that. Gary's playing is great as always. But after a while, I kind of found out that I was more interested in waiting to hear what his guitar solos were going to sound like, and I didn't really care about the songs anymore. So there you have two halves of a catalog, pretty much, that you have to kind of figure out, well, is the fair thing to do to just do a ranking of all the rock stuff and then do all the blues albums totally separate, and you have two rankings for Gary Moore? Again, it's ultimately not what I decided to do, but you show your bias a little bit when you mix it all up together, right? And that's kind of what happens. And you really don't have much of a choice if you decide to throw all these different eras in the mix and hear two different styles of music from a guy who pretty much went under the radar for many, many people, at least from the mainstream, until he went and decided to do the blues thing.
Yeah. And then when you do that ranking, you get two criticisms, right? Number one, you get, well, you're disrespecting Gary's true nature of who he is now. So you're not really a fan of him, the person. You're a fan of this thing he did semi-unwillingly, according to him in interviews, right? Yeah. And then you're also like showing, well, you're obviously not a serious music fan because you don't like the blues as much as you like hard rock, right? So yeah, you'll get that criticism as well. You're not a very studious scholar of music if you're putting down the blues stuff, for this riff rock garbage, right?
I know. So we don't dislike it, we just don't like it as much as that heavy stuff, right?
Yeah. All right. So my last one is Robert Plant. We just finished a Robert Plant panel book, which is coming out next year through Weimar. Just calling it, what are we calling it? Pictures at 11, Robert Plant album by album. And the problem with this catalog, it's a little bit like the Gary Moore one in that he's changing so much over the years here, and everybody has their factions. They'll fall on a certain album. You get the people who are such old school Led Zeppelin fans that they're only going to like the album that sounds the most like Led Zeppelin, which is the very first one, right? So you're going to get those guys. You get people like me who happen to like the second album as the greatest Robert Plant album. But then, am I not liking the true nature of Robert Plant? Because let's skip over the middle for a second. The true nature of Robert Plant is this strange blues world music amalgamation, sound chaser, tone chaser of odd, interesting sounds that are super modern and sophisticated, but they're all made to sound old, right? It's almost like taking a chain to a coffee table to antique it, right? That's what all these recent Robert Plant albums are like. And the thing that he does is he has actually settled on a sound for the last 4 albums, kind of thing. There's the cover stuff in there as well. Nobody's going to rate that sort of highly, but so if you're a serious Robert Plant fan who's loyal to him and is stuck to the situation and respects who he is and is a serious scholar of music, you're gonna have to pick one of the last couple of albums, right? Lullaby or Carry Fire kind of thing. You pretty much, there's a buddy of mine, Ralph Chapman, probably would pick. He does the whole chapter on Shaken and Stirred in here, which is the oddball out album, the zesty weird one, right? No one's pretty much going to pick Now and Zen or Manic Nirvana, but some people do. It's like, this is the stadium years. This is when he was the biggest, especially Now and Zen. So the catalog is kind of all over the place. It's a little bit like the Fleetwood Mac situation as well. But yeah, ranking this catalog. So what goes through your mind is that okay, well, I got to have something new higher up, but they're all kind of similar. So I just pick one, and how high do I put it, or do I get them all in there? Because really, one is not any worse than any of the other ones. But when do you start putting in your true favorites? Sometimes with these rankings, I'll say something like, I got to go with my heart here. I know I'm going to get abuse for this, or I'm going to go with the boring answer, right? Sometimes you say, look, the boring answer is the correct answer. And then how much boring do I put in, and where do I put in something a little controversial, and how much am I really feeling it, sort of thing. So all these thoughts go through your mind with these catalogs, but I'll stop there on Robert Plant.
And with Robert Plant too, then what do you do with the collaboration albums, right? Yeah. The albums with Jimmy and the albums with drawing a blank on her name that he's been working with of late.
Yes, Alison Krauss and Honey Drippers, and yeah, the 2 Page Plant albums.
So
and
there's all this other stuff.
Yeah, and then even the 2 Page Plant albums are a mess, right? One of them is very derivative of Zeppelin, and one of them is all new material, right? So
right. So do you include them in the Zeppelin ranking? Do you include them in the Robert Plant ranking? You just leave them on their own, because you're not going to rank them on their own, right? So it's just like, what do you do with this stuff? It's not like Robert has a ton of albums anyway. So do you just throw all this stuff into the pile and just say, all right, have at it?
And on a just to cut that point finer, it's like we left out the 2 Alison Krauss albums, but what is really different than Robert Plant collaborating with Alison Krauss and a bunch of American band guys, or Robert Plant just collaborating with a bunch of American band guys? Like, the only difference is you've got one extra elevated person in this collaboration. They're all collaborations, right? In fact, all of Robert Plant albums are basically like that, right? There's a lot of different band members and stuff. So even without changing the name on the tin, you get as radical changes as if we would have stuck in Walking into Clarksdale, right?
Yeah. All right, my last one today is Martin's favorite band of all time, Chicago.
Nice. Chicago reference. Excellent.
So here is where I will admit that when I did the Chicago ranking, I basically said, all right, so we've got a shit ton of albums, right? I don't even know what they're up to now. Chicago 38, 42, 53, whatever. I only really like the 70s stuff. Yep, get off my lawn. I'm one of those guys. But you know what? Other than those, Chicago 16 and 17 and maybe 19 or 20 or 21, nobody really gives a crap about all those later Chicago albums, because they're all just cookie cutter, funky pop schmaltzy stuff, right? Whether 25, 29, 32, whatever. It's like I have some of them. They're not good. They're not memorable. So I made the executive decision when it came time to do Chicago. It's like, you know what? I am only going to rank the albums that the late guitarist Terry Kath appeared on. And that's it. Not many people complained about that, right? Because I think this is a band where you can do that and people are like, the real meat of the Chicago repertoire, discography, are those first, 10, 12 albums, right? 10 albums. So I did it. I loved every minute of it because I love those albums. Did I feel guilty, Martin, about not including any of those other ones? Maybe for half a second. Not really. Because they're not very good. And I what am I going to say about them? You brought up the point before. I would have to go listen to those 15 albums that I don't have, because I've got so many of them. And then the ones that I do have that I just don't care about, I got to go revisit them again and waste time doing it. And what am I really going to say about them? And how do you rank like 15 albums that you just don't give a shit about, that aren't very good and all sound basically the same? It's very, very hard to do. So I ultimately decided I'm not going to do it. And I do that from occasion. But, then there's other enormous catalogs that, may also have varying degrees of success that I will slog through and do the entire thing. Just because maybe, even though certain eras of the band I respect and love more than others, I still respect the whole catalog. I can't say honestly that I respect the whole Chicago catalog. I proclaim my love for Chicago all the time, but it's really a very small era of their entire history that really resonates with me, and the rest of it I just honestly don't care about. So for those watching who have been waiting patiently all these years for me to rank Chicago 11 through whatever they're up to now, it's probably not going to happen, people. And I know most people are going to be okay with that decision, and the few that aren't, well, what can I tell you? It's not going to happen. So
it's funny, a bunch of years ago, a buddy of mine, Rob Kern from Ohio, wrote a little book where he said, I'm going to listen to nothing but Chicago and rank all their albums and review them all. It's pretty funny. But had a couple of honorable mentions. I mentioned Clutch before. Again, I had a problem with this one because I love Clutch so much that I had 3 or 4 albums all at the top and I couldn't pick one, but eventually came down to Blast Tyrant. And I had to really go through the problem with that catalog is I play their stuff so much all the time, and it's all on iPod in my car or walking around or jogging or biking or whatever, that all the songs jumble together. I know everything about every single note of those songs, but I didn't really have a grasp of song titles. That's the first problem. And the other problem is even what albums they're on. And then they do such interesting things song to song to song that there was almost no identity. And this happens in the modern day more than the old day, but there was no identity with each actual album versus other albums. So I had that problem. Kate Bush is a funny one where we thought, oh, this will allow us to talk about some bands we don't talk about very much. It's like, oh, people want us to talk about Kate Bush. Let's put Kate Bush in here. I thought about it for 2 seconds and go, it doesn't fit this theme though. These catalogs are a pain to rank. It probably wouldn't be a pain to rank. It seems kind of like a normal in the rank. So maybe that's coming.
The pain, Martin, is that people have been asking for like 3 years for the Kate Bush ranking. We still haven't done it. There's
exactly. That is the pain. Yeah. UFO, kind of the same problem as Thin Lizzy and Van Halen. But I've got that big other issue that people, I really lean down on the Tonka years for my favorite albums. But I might lean to the Schenker years for my favorite songs. There's that weird problem. The Police, I'm not really feeling Police too much as a problem, but I guess the problem there is there's only 5 albums and they all have, interesting, unique value to them. So that's hard. And then Heap is a problem because I always say Abominog is my favorite Heap album. And I love that era, but they're doing such amazing music now. And then they've got the old classics. So those are my honorable mentions.
Yeah. For me, Wishbone Ash was the one I made a change on here because of Wishbone. And I remember doing that Wishbone Ash ranking. They got a lot of albums. And originally I was just going to do a top 10. I said, you know what? I'm going to go through the whole catalog. And that was a really long episode. Thankfully, I did it solo. And just, again, you've got those early classics. You got that really strong second period in the band. Then you got all these lineup changes and them struggling with direction and whatnot. And then you have a lot of really strong latter period stuff. So it was really hard to kind of like put in perspective, God, how do you rank all this stuff, right? So those really, like the Heap catalog also was a challenge, like you mentioned, I mean, because you got all these different eras and, the early stuff, the great early stuff, the great latter period stuff, the really cool early 80s stuff. Where do you put the weaker 70s stuff? You got the Lawton albums, which are really good. And you got the early Bernie albums, which are really good. And a couple of 90s albums that maybe aren't quite as good. Very, very difficult. Nazareth is another one. You got the classic early stuff, and then you got these questionable early 80s albums, which are very poppy, and then all these late 80s and 90s albums, which to me are kind of nondescript. I couldn't tell you how. I've had these albums for years. I couldn't tell you how half of the songs go on there. And then you got some of the latter period stuff, which is really strong. And then you got the stuff post Dan McCafferty, which is hard for me to grasp. So what do you do with this catalog? Alice Cooper is another one. Here's an interesting concept, Martin, because we kind of talked about it earlier. Alice Cooper is one of those artists who, when I was growing up into Kiss and Sabbath and Purple and Maiden and Scorpions and Priest and all those other bands, I never listened to Alice Cooper back then. No reason. Not like I didn't like Alice Cooper. When I heard the stuff on the radio, I was like, oh, this is great. I never bought an Alice Cooper album, never went to see him at all, probably till the mid-late 90s. So when I dove into Alice Cooper, the catalog, I dove into everything at once. But you know what albums I still gravitate towards? Love It to Death, Killers, School's Out, Billion Dollar Babies, Welcome to My Nightmare. Those are always going to be my favorites, even though I didn't really have any history there. And I was listening to all the 80s stuff and the 90s and 2000 stuff and the classics all at the same time. So again, another hard ranking to do, because you got all these eras, all this stuff, the hair metal era, the really cool latter period stuff, some of the new metal stuff, right? The classic early stuff. Then you got the weird early, those 2 psychedelic albums, right? Which are kind of weird, right? Then the black era, the early 80s stuff where Alice was, drugged out of his mind and had these weird new wavy kind of albums. So really difficult. Genesis is difficult because you got the early classic prog stuff, you got the pop stuff, right? So depending on, Martin and I totally disagree when it comes to Genesis. So, and that's cool, right? The Who is kind of difficult. You don't have a lot of albums, but you got these big gaps in, them putting anything out. You got the revered late 60s, early 70s stuff. You got the kind of like R&B pop early stuff filled with singles and weird songs and covers. Then you got the early 80s stuff, which is really kind of mellow and very different. And then all the stuff at the end, right? So hard stuff to do. Deep Purple's hard. You got all these marks, right? Everybody should think that the Mark II stuff should be at the top. Maybe the Mark III following. Some people love the early psychedelic stuff. Some people don't. Some people don't even bother with the latter period, the Morse era stuff, but we like that stuff a lot. So it's almost like sacrilege to put Perpendicular in a top 5 or top 10 Deep Purple ranking, right? How can you do that? It's possible, right? So yeah, lots of interesting catalogs here that are just a pain to rank, because it's just very, very difficult what direction you go to. And I will say a comment on the Police. When we did that Police ranking on Hack, after you and I did the Police here on the channel a couple of years back, I found that difficult because the Police, if you have these handful of records that are very, very strong and have great songs on all of them, and any given time, my ranking can be completely different. In fact, my ranking that we did on Hack Show was way different than when you and I did it a couple of years ago. And that's frustrating too, because it's almost like you second guess yourself. It's like, well, should I go back and watch the previous 2 times I did this to see what I was thinking in 2020 and 2023, and now here in 2025? Maybe I like these albums a little different. So.
The other thing about the Police that I found odd is that Zenyatta Mondatta has always been at the bottom of my list, but you guys liked it, and apparently in the comments too, a lot of people love that album, right? So it's like, oh, I guess I'm wrong about that one, right?
Yeah.
But quick comment on Alice Cooper that I just realized is that, I could envision Alice having gone that whole journey through the late 70s and the 80s and the 90s and the 2000s with that old band. I mean, I could, even though there was one guy left out of all 5 when you get to Welcome to My Nightmare, I could imagine, Neil and Dennis, maybe not so much Michael Bruce, but I can imagine Neil and Dennis and Alice dressed up in their Judas Priest black and red leather turbo suits, and getting their hair done in Holly Rock, kind of thing, and making that whole journey. I could picture Neil drumming every single one of those albums, right? Yeah. So yeah, it's odd. It's like even though he goes solo, it's a journey that I could see the original band absolutely making as well. They could have been there the whole long way, and then maybe Alice wouldn't have almost died if he had his buddies there with him through the blackout period, right? Maybe they would have even been more successful had he kept the old band. But there's no particular creative differences, I don't think, between those guys.
No, I would agree with you. On a related and somewhat unrelated note, I have a question for you, maybe a little bit of advice. Welcome to My Nightmare. Is that a solo Alice Cooper album, or is that a solo band album?
Yeah, interesting, eh?
The reason you want to know why I ask you, because I'm doing this whole month-long show every day on my favorite 30 solo albums. And I've had to revamp my whole list because the more I started thinking about it, I was like, God, half of my list are like solo band albums. And I'm starting to think, Holy Diver isn't a solo album. Mr. Universe isn't a solo album. Marching Out isn't a solo album. Eat 'Em and Smile isn't really a solo album. Blizzard of Oz or Diary of a Madman really isn't a solo album. Ted Nugent, self-titled, really isn't a solo album, right? Because that's a band album. Those are all band albums. So the only one, so I took them all out, and I'm going to do a separate month talking about solo bands where, Blackmore's Rainbow and Dio and all these other bands. And I'm going to, rank my favorite solo bands and my favorite albums from them. But the more I thought about it, I'm like, these really aren't solo records, right? That they really aren't.
That's a great idea. Yeah. Because the point is, a solo album, a solo artist, it's like there's a dozen or 20 jobs you can take on, right? And the more of those jobs you take on, you start moving over to I am a solo artist. The less of those jobs you take on, you're part of a band. It doesn't matter what the name on the tin is, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And obviously it's more of a band, if the name on the tin is more like a band, like Dio versus Ozzy Osbourne, right? One is a little more band sounding of a name than the other, but you think of a Peter Gabriel and you think a bunch of the vision is his, and it's these guys fulfilling his vision. So you feel like that's a solo artist, right?
Yeah. Like
Michael
Schenker, I took off because I'm like, he put together a band. That's not really a solo album. So the only one that I have left that I'm struggling with is Alice Cooper. And I'm just kind of like, are those early Alice, from Welcome to My Nightmare and onward, are those really solo albums? Do they have, and I look, it's like, are the same musicians appearing on every single album? Is he changing it up all the time? Are there a lot of people listed on the credits, all these people? Because to me, a solo album is when you bring in a whole bunch of people to help you out with this album. And it's not necessarily.
And it's your vision and you're the boss and you're doing most of the writing. You might even write some of the music, but you're certainly writing the lyrics, and he's got a lot of outside songwriters and stuff, but he is the boss. It is his vision. It's all those records are supposed to reflect his personality, even though it might be a David Bowie-esque changing of personality over time, whatever. But yeah, it's funny. It's all, and it's like, how much of an A-type personality are you? How much are you running the show? How much are you led around? How much can you be influenced by your musicians? How much can you be influenced by your manager? Right?
Yeah.
That's a good one. I would almost say you could go through that entire solo catalog and almost give a number rating on how much is it a band and how much is it a solo album.
Yeah. It's absolutely so. Yeah, it's proven to be a challenge. I thought what would be an easy month of programming is like, I started thinking about it. I'm like, I think I approached this all wrong, right? So whatever, that's okay. Anyway, Martin, updates on your end, podcasts, books, contrarians, all that stuff. Anything new happening, exciting?
Well, not particularly. No new books. I'll have the Kiss book back in stock, but I did get a bunch of the things that I was out of stock in Weimar in recently. So yeah, martinpopoff.com for the books. My audio podcast, History in 5 Songs with Martin Popoff, just Google it. And Contrarians, we always got shows going on as well on YouTube.
Cool. Sounds good. All right, coming up here on the channel, just a few hours, Ken Golden will be taking up Martin's seat here in the Zoom, and he'll be talking about some of the cool new releases that are coming out today, because Friday is new release day. So stay tuned for that, for the professor's picks. And then I will be ranking the albums on Sunday of Three Man Army, cool little hard rock band featuring Paul and Adrian Gervitz right before they joined Ginger Baker for Baker Gervitz Army. So 4 albums, I'll be ranking those on Sunday. So till then, visit us on the web at www.seatranquility.org. We're on Facebook, we're on YouTube all together all the damn time. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and click on that notification bell so you get alert of all of our content as it posts. And please do hit the like button before you leave, and please do show Martin some love over on the Contrarians, the podcast, and martinpopoff.com for all your book needs. And have a good weekend, everybody. For Martin Popoff, I'm Pete Pardo. See you next week here at the Funhouse. Take care. Bye-bye.